It's day 2 of ActionSA's inaugural policy conference. Today, party leaders are expected to address delegates on healthcare, foreign policy, law and order. In his opening remarks, party president Herman Mashaba said the party is an alternative that will bring hope to many South Africans. More than 600 delegates are participating in the conference, currently being held in Boksburg. eNCA's Pule Letshwiti-Jones is following through with this story and joins us live now for the updates. Pule, very warm good morning to you. What's the latest regarding the conference and how it's going?
Definitely, yes, today is of course a day 2. Yesterday, during its inaugural policy conference, the party extensively spoke about the energy crisis and how the energy crisis could be resolved, which would be a solution to the, economy of the country as well. But they also proposed, amongst other issues, around issues that would speak to improving the economy, one of which, of course, was a voluntary one-year program of public educational services for all South Africans who are turning 18, and the party believing that this would, of course, the high unemployment rate in the country. Some of the things that expect to be discussed and debated here today during the policy conference, of course, includes policy around foreign ideas and foreign policy, and of course the healthcare and law and order. Yesterday, we had discussions around some of the delegates who were speaking about the return of the death penalty in addition to addressing crime. But to expand more on these discussions by the national chairperson of ActionSA, Michael Bowman. Michael, thank you very much for chatting to us on eNCA this morning. Maybe let's start with what are some of the topics that you will be extensively discussing today, one of which will be interesting around law and order, particularly with some saying there should be a open discussion around how the death penalty should be reintroduced in an attempt to fight crime in the country.
Well, certainly of interesting discussions, and I think we've seen a policy conference where the level of engagement and debate is certainly very high. There may be many discussions around that, but I think ultimately delegates probably feel the country has socio-economic differences and a broken justice system, and the consequence of having a death penalty under those circumstances may result in innocent people who do not have the means themselves. And that's why I think we will be looking more about minimum sentencing and the need to ensure that when people commit violent crime, get out to do. But certainly there will be a tough on crime policy that I think will be distinct from any other party in South Africa.
And of course, when you speak about law and order, have you received some amendments or ideas or some proposals from to what part of the amendment?
We have received those need to build more, so the early role needs to ensure that minimum sentencing is prescribed in such a way that it won't come out to inflict harm upon people. It speaks to the need to have manual labor for prisoners to keep and build the societies that they have been so instrumental in breaking. But it also speaks to the need to fix our policing. Our policing system has been broken in South Africa, and we need to ensure that we can have a scenario where a crime is committed, a person goes to jail. It has to become that simple.
You're also expected to speak about the foreign policy as well. What are some of the key things we can expect from the discussions around that policy?
Well, certainly, I think the perspective is to move away from a debate that has long been polarized around whether we are East or West oriented. We need to be South African oriented. We want a foreign policy that is going to drive the interests of South Africa, and we want a foreign policy that's going to drive human rights in the region, in the continent, and across the world. And we want to reorientate South Africa against that program, which in many ways is operating out of a foreign policy that's based in the 1980s. Countries like Cuba offer very little value to South Africa in 2023, and we need to have a debate around where that value can be for South Africa, given the massive need to reconstruct our economy.
Obviously, will you be also talking around the involvement of South Africa in the expansion of the BRICS bloc, of course, within the SADC regions, and of course, inviting other countries, such as those from the Gulf state as well?
Certainly, and I think for what it's worth, what we'll be talking about in this policy is to remain in such associations and to perhaps expand into further associations. We think the addition of some of these countries can offer a great deal of value to South Africa, especially as our petrol price continues to soar and the price of oil continues to affect our currency, or affect our country because of our currency. But effectively, we also need to ask some important questions about human rights issues. We have an important role to play in that regard. But I think what's important to say is you can only impact those conversations if you're part of an association. It's much harder to do when you're outside of it.
And of course, there's the issue around labor as well, when many have raised a point around cheap labor. And this would speak to how we have an issue of, undocumented foreign nationals as well in the country. The party's president, Helen Mashaba, has been quite vocal about this as well. Is this a subtopic that will be extensively discussed as well, around how South Africans will be prioritized when you're looking at jobs, and of course wanting to speak to unemployment as well, in which South Africans be prioritized?
Without any question, and our laws already speak in a great deal on these issues, and in many ways what we need to see is enforcement of our laws. But I think from a foreign policy point of view, where this gets interesting, Pule, is that we need to talk about our role in the region and on the continent, where we have a lot of influence, where we are a relative power, and we need to be able to put the screws on governments that are creating crises in their country of an economic and a political nature that is creating an immigration crisis in our country. I think we need to talk about that under the foreign policy section, and we need to be saying to the president of Zimbabwe that the crisis that has been created in that country can no longer continue to create an immigration crisis in South Africa.
And of course, Michael, you speak about a law and order as well, which would speak to the justice system and ensuring that you protect some of the institutions as well that ensure justice and protecting the country's sovereignty, democracy and constitution. We've seen recently with the president now having fired Busisiwe Mkhwebane after a parliament vote. As ActionSA, just maybe your reaction on that as well. Was this a wise decision to make?
Well, certainly. I think the conduct of the public protector is very much a matter that's been part of the public domain for some time and of great concern to many of us. We ourselves have had to take her on review successfully and overturn reports that she has produced that appear to have been deliberate in their intention to make cast aspersions on political opponents of some sort or another. But I think our perspective here is that we need to move away from a situation whether a person is aligned to this faction or another faction, to say these Chapter 9 institutions need to operate independently of politics. And we will be bringing a proposal here to talk about how we insulate these Chapter 9 institutions from politics, because they need to serve the people. The public protector is the protector of the people, not the protector of politicians. And that's what we work to fix.
Michael, thank you very much. It's the National Chairperson of ActionSA, Michael Bowman, joining me. Maybe we just get here, don't you? Just why? How do you feel? You delegate a first policy conference. Are you contributing towards the party's concrete policy framework as well?
Okay, my name is Tekiso, all along from the Free State. So I in the policy conference, taking part actually, and we are aiming to unseat the African National Congress with immediate effect. And then what is happening here is that our people are suffering because they are being promised that does not exist on this living earth.
Oh, all right, sir.
I'm Bulelani from Eastern Cape, Epizana. Be here in this, and all these policies are going to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Bulelani. Yeah.
All right, that's Pule Letshwiti-Jones continuing on to speak to some of the ActionSA members. This at the back of a conversation he had with the National Chairperson of ActionSA, Michael Beaumont, about the agenda of the conference, saying there's a plethora of issues that they aim to tackle, amongst others, load shedding, economic growth, and what the party, of course, promises to deliver to South Africans should they be voted into power. You could see the confidence of some of the members saying that they aim to unseat the ANC during national national elections next year. We'll, of course, go back to Pule Letshwiti-Jones and just find out if there are any other updates and developments from ActionSA's conference today, this morning.